here at Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Republic, where we have just completed a wonderful forum of the Global Network of Religions for Children that mobilizes the world's faith-based communities as well as some of the secular organizations to focus on the well-being and rights of children. We had magnificent discussions and we have come up with a very encouraging declaration and a plan of action on what we need to do to try to improve the plight of children, which is at this moment very problematic in the world. Religions through time immemorial have done many good things to uplift the people's spirit, to inculcate values, culture, but it is also true that in the name of religion a lot of bad things happen. While our scriptures and great prophets and their teachings may be wonderful and uplifting, many of the actions in the field sometimes carried out by local priests are not so enlightened. For example, they are the ones who officiate child marriage. In some parts of the world, there is the female genital cutting that is done in the name of religion. What this conference was about is, can we bring out the best in our scriptures, best in the teachings of the great prophets, and diffuse that and make that the driving force for the promotion of the well-being of children and their rights. Indeed, among the more enlightened leaders, religious leaders, when you see them dialoguing among themselves, the best of every religion, every tradition, every faith communities comes out. Historically, UN agencies, including UNICEF, did not work very closely with faith-based organizations because, many of them are guided by the principle of separation of church and state, and they kept a certain distance. But UNICEF in particular, in the 1980s, we had a very dynamic, visionary, charismatic leaders who wanted to promote some very ambitious goals, like increasing childhood immunization that was only 10-15% to 80% or 90%. And we found out that ministries of health alone cannot do it. Many government agencies don't have the reach. Who reaches every village, every community? Faith-based organizations. There are churches, temples, mosques in every village, in every town. They have a far greater outreach than many government services. Why don't we seek their help? And indeed, that's what we did. And with the help of faith-based organizations, we were able to launch massive immunization campaigns, reaching thousands of people and reaching the goals from 10-15% to 60-70-80% within a few years. That made us realize that faith-based organizations are an amazingly influential and effective partners. The UN organizations, intergovernmental organizations, have signed on to lots of treaties, conventions, human rights, child rights, women's rights, etc. And sometimes religious organizations had some reluctance. Are they in conformity with our values and principles and teachings of our prophets? So what we did, in fact, Arigatou International, in partnering with UNICEF and other organizations, we compared what are the child rights convention and what are the teachings in the Bible or the Quran or whatever holy scriptures. Is there a contradiction or a complementarity? And guess what we found? For the most part, they are fully compatible. In the 1980s, there was a terrible civil war going on in El Salvador, where there were the guerrillas and the government fighting. It was an ideological fight, and they could not see eye to eye. There were lots of children being killed in warfare, but even more children were dying because they were not getting immunization, they were not getting simple nutritional interventions, etc. We have to do something to stop the war. To get both parties to agree, the most important challenge for us was to go to the guerrillas there. Who do they trust? They will not trust the promise of the government. They are enemies. They don't trust each other. So we said, who do they trust most? And we found out that it was the Catholic Church in that country. So we went to the leadership of the Catholic Church and said, look, in the name of religion, in the name of God, let's try to have immunizing all children and stop the warfare. The Catholic leaders in the country were interested, but they were not sure if their top leadership in Rome would agree. So we actually had to go all the way to the Pope in Rome to get his blessing and support. With his support, both parties agreed, and we had days of tranquility in which children were getting shots, not the gunshots, but the vaccination shots. The world, unfortunately, spends a lot of money on defense, so-called defense. Actually, it's the warfare. $2.3 trillion are spent every year now on arms and armies. And to me, the ultimate answer in wars, there is rarely any winner. All parties lose. So for me, my personal experience and UNICEF's experience has taught me to never give up, continue to be optimistic, because the children of the world deserve nothing less than that. I was born and brought up in what used to be a very remote part of Nepal, where there was no school, there were no health posts, there was no drinking water, there were no toilets, and no post office, no telephone, all the modern amenities of life that you can think of. None of them existed. The nearest bus stop was 5 days walk from my village. So from that situation, through a series of accidents, coincidences, good luck as well as hard work, I was able to overcome all of them and get a good quality education, work for the United Nations, and help so many children in the world. We all have potential is everywhere. The opportunities are not everywhere. You have to seize those opportunities, you have to create those opportunities. So that's why my life is dedicated to how can we create more such opportunities for the least privileged children in the world. And that continues to motivate me. I think these intergenerational dialogues are extremely important because we learn from each other and come up with better ideas. Our hope lies in young people. So I would hope that from primary schools, middle schools to universities, that we would have this kind of a education for global solidarity, education for common good, education for mutual understanding, education that teaches children to be friends with others, not to suspect others. I think educational institutions and academic institutions have an enormous role to play. I think the medium of art, film, sports is extremely important to generate this feeling of brotherhood, sisterhood among people of different cultures. Art unites, politics divides, and therefore art and culture and sports are something that we have to promote. They can play a more important role than many of the laws that are necessary but not enough. For young people to break those barriers, consider themselves as human beings, citizens of the world. And if they do that, and if we break more barriers, I think the world has enormous potential. What we can do today with the digital technology, with the scientific and technological breakthroughs, we can be, unimaginable kind of progress is possible. But the opposite is also possible. If we misuse this technology, who knows what could happen. So our message really has to be, let us focus on the positive, use the technology, use the digital world to spread good messages and start movements led by young people against nuclear weapons, against war. And what we have seen is sometimes what great leaders cannot do, children have been able to do.